Hey everybody, welcome to Brookside Banter. My name's Greg. I'm the lead pastor at Brookside Baptist Church. Thanks for tuning in to this episode. We are talking today about watching home movies. We're in the final leg of this series called Road Trip, and it's kind of focusing in on what happens after we kind of get back and we kind of review, and we're using that analogy for the fact that when we see Jesus face to face, when we're in heaven, there are things that he's going to be looking for that ought to be highlights in our lives that we have the opportunity to highlight ourselves here and now. And in the final passage that we looked at, which is 1 Peter chapter 5, we looked at some of those questions together. What is it that Jesus will highlight in our lives? And some of the things that we pointed out were perhaps a little surprising to some of us. Peter focuses in on leadership and followership as key. Leaders leading well, followers following well, and all of us living well. That's really what it boiled down to. And this raised some really good questions for us to take a couple of minutes and talk about here in Brookside Banter. The first question, simply this, part of the problem we mentioned was that it's often hard to find people willing to be leaders, and it's often hard to find people willing to really be followers too. And the question is, well, is that because we've been told that we should all be leaders? And in a way, yeah. Our culture, I think, is conditioning us to see followership, being a follower, as a sign of weakness, as a sign of inferiority, as a sign that we somehow don't have it all together. If we were really on top of our game, we'd be leading the way and everybody would be following us, except they wouldn't be following us because they'd be leading themselves too. There is some problems with that logic. But yeah, I think one of the big problems we have in our culture, and one of the things that a follower of Jesus needs to really wrestle with, is the value, the wisdom, the calling to be a follower, a good follower of others, and a follower primarily of Jesus. Second question that was asked has to do with the issue of leadership and the challenge of calling ourselves a leader and being willing to be identified as a leader in whatever setting we're in. Isn't that kind of a pride thing? Aren't we supposed to be humble, and we're supposed to, not make much of ourselves? Doesn't calling ourselves a leader and saying, hey, I'm a leader, doesn't that somehow fly in the face of this whole being humble thing? And the reality is, no, it's not. If we are called to be a leader, if God has wired us to be leaders, then be a leader. That's not being that's not being proudful or prideful. That's being humble. That's being, this is what God's created me to be. This is what I'm called to do. It's actually being obedient to the call. It's being obedient in serving Jesus when a leader leads. So leadership does not mean pride, although it can in some cases, and we talked about that a fair bit in the message. If you missed it, you're welcome to listen in. You can find it on mybrookside.church in the call down for sermon audio. You can find it there. But the question is, leadership and humility incompatible? No. In fact, if you're called to be a leader and gifted by God to be a leader, and you're unwilling to do it out of some I'm too humble kind of thing, you're actually walking in disobedience. So, not the case. One last question, and it's a really important question. We're called as followers to follow well. What if we don't agree with where the leaders are going? What do we do? How do we handle it? How do we respond if the leadership is moving in a direction we don't like, is doing things that we don't really want them to do, or they're calling us to do things that we don't really want to do? How do we handle that? Great question. To me, this is one of the most important issues facing churches today. So let me give you a real quick, here's some don'ts, here's some do's. I'll start with the don'ts, end with the do's, if you don't mind. The first thing is simply this: don't assume the worst. Don't assume the worst of your leaders. Don't if they're going in a direction that you didn't expect or don't really particularly want, or they're changing things in a way that you didn't want, don't assume they've gone off the deep end and they're denying Christ and everything else. It's very possible that they have some really good reasons why they're doing it. So don't assume the worst. Don't just get upset and leave. Too many people never say anything. They just walk out the doors, and I don't know if they expect that leaders are telepathic or something and can just know what they're thinking. Don't do that. That's not what being part of the family, the body of Christ, is all about. Family members don't walk away from their family because they don't like something that the head of the family has decided to do. That's crazy. So don't do those kind of things. What should you do? First of all, extend grace. Pray for them. Recognize that being a leader is not easy. Recognize that for a leader to encourage and inspire and initiate change takes guts. It takes a lot of courage, and they are hoping that you will be graceful toward them, that they will assume, or they will hope that you will be giving them the benefit of the doubt. Okay? So do extend a grace. Talk to them. If you've got questions, if things don't make sense, if you don't understand, maybe they tried to communicate it, maybe they didn't do the greatest job communicating it. Whatever it is, talk to them. Hear them out. Ask them, well, why are you doing this? I thought we were doing this. I thought we were doing that. I thought we were going in this direction. Can you explain to me why? And allow them the opportunity to share with you the reasons why they're doing it, and recognize that perhaps what they're doing, what they're initiating, is reasonable, even if you don't like it, even if it's not exactly what you wanted, even if it's kind of goes against what you were hoping or expecting. If it's helping fulfill the mission of God, if it's helping people grow closer to Jesus, if it's helping people become better disciples of Jesus, if it's helping you as a church family reach more people for Jesus, then sometimes you have to say, you know what? I don't like it, but I'm gonna put up with it. I'm gonna endure this for the sake of the gospel and for the strength of the body. I'm not gonna get my way, and that's okay. That's something that we have to do. If there's a legitimate concern, if there's something where it's like, you know what, you're stepping out of bounds, you're stepping out beyond the lines of what the gospel is calling us to, then you need to go to your board. You need to go and talk. Again, follow biblical principles and guidelines for handling those kinds of disagreements. Do it in a healthy way with a desire to see reconciliation, and ultimately support your leadership. That's what God is calling you to do. Again, I'm not talking about supporting them in sin. If that's what is being done, then perhaps you need to find another place. But if the people are seeking honestly to serve the Lord and to follow Him, then you need to listen to that, and you need to do your best to be a part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem. All right, well, hope you have an awesome day. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Look forward to hearing or seeing from you again on our next Brookside Banner. Have a good one.